Okay, well, let's get started. I think as far as people in the room, I think most people kind of know a lot of the content for this talk. But we'll have the people online, and then we'll have it for posterity online. So contributing to Xen. So the first thing to say about contributing to Xen is that we do want your patches, okay? However, there is kind of a tension here, because we do want your patches, but we often talk about free software as in right, so why do we want your patches? First of all, it's personally gratifying for us as individuals to know that the software that we're writing is actually being used by people. But of course, we're not paid by our employers for our own personal gratification. It benefits our employers as well. So first of all, the more people who use Xen, the better kind of brand and mind share and so on that our employers get. And additionally, it's possible that our employers actually want to use the code that you are writing. If you found something that's been useful, maybe it'll be useful for us as well. However, there's a tension here. When we talk about free software, we often say, we talk about free as in free speech or free as in free beer. For the maintainers of an open source project, free software is often free as in free puppy. So if you've ever actually owned an animal, you know that although a puppy may be free to acquire, it is not free to keep, right? There's a lot of time and effort that has to go into maintaining and the puppy after you get it. And the same is true for us as maintainers. So if you come and you submit a patch and then you go off and disappear, we as maintainers, the people, they're going to have to deal with the bugs and the ongoing maintenance of that piece of software. So we do want your patches, but we're kind of aware that we're probably going to be the ones that are going to be stuck with maintaining it. So just keep that in mind as you come to contribute to the project. So first, how does any patch get in? So first of all, we have the concept of maintainers. So the Xen project is large and complicated enough now. I mean, it was large and complicated enough 15 years ago. Now it's way too large and complicated for any one person to know how the whole thing works. And one of the things you have is what I call the one little change problem. Okay, so you come to the Xen project, it's a big, massive thing. You're like, I don't know. So you're like, well, what if I just add this little tiny thing over here on the side? And then the person reviewing it, if there's no one that has a vision for the whole project, they're just like, well, I don't know what to do either. I guess that's kind of okay. Check it in. And then you get loads of like little tiny hacks on top of hacks on top of hacks, and pretty soon you have a completely unmaintainable mess. So the idea is to have someone whose role it is to have a long-term interest in the maintainability of some piece of code. And you can find the maintainers in Xen.git under the maintainers, and you can use the same structure as that is used in Linux. So there's a script called git maintainers that if you feed git maintainers your patch, it will tell you who to CC on your email. Just the last thing to cover is the idea of nested maintainership. So we have the maintainer for the shadow code is a guy named Tim Deegan, who was involved in Xen way back in the day. I used to be the maintainer for the MM code, of which the shadow was outside of that, and the MM code was underneath the x86 maintainers. And then on top of that, there's the concept of the rest. And so the idea is that I'll explain a little bit later about how, but basically, a maintainer for a higher level area can, if they want to, overrule a maintainer for a lower level area. And CC everyone on the patch when you're sending it. And there's loads of parts of the code that don't have an explicit maintainer, and that goes to the rest, which is basically the committers. When does a patch get checked in? So first of all, a patch can get checked in. Basically, you need to have the approval. You have to have the approval of at least one maintainer whose code the patch touches. Okay, so if the patch touches, these three different code maintained by these three different maintainers, you have to have at least an ACK or reviewed from one of those maintainers. You also have to have the approval or acquiescence of everyone who has raised an issue. And again, there's some more subtlety to this that we'll talk about later on. We have the committers. Technically speaking, the committer is just a secretarial role. They actually just check the stuff into the tree. But because the committer implies a certain level of trust, we kind of use that to be the leadership team of the project. So they're the kind of the final authority If you have problems with maintainers, then you can appeal to the committers, and they can overrule the maintainer if they want, or so on. We'll get to that more in a bit later. Yes, and it is kind of worth saying that we probably are in the future going to pull some of these things out, but this is the way that it is right now. So regarding conflict resolution, the goal is always to try to achieve consensus. That's the first thing that we try to do. But that's not always possible. And so if there's a disagreement, if someone on the list who's not a maintainer says, I don't like this, then the maintainer can, if they want to, say, you know what, we're just going to go with this. Okay, so the maintainer of a piece of code can overrule a non-maintainer discussion on the list. Obviously, this is in yellow because it's something we generally try to avoid, but it's there if it needs to happen. A nested maintainer, like the higher level maintainer, can overrule a lower level maintainer. Okay, they can also stand in for them. So like if Tim is away and we need someone to act the change to the shadow code, then the x86 maintainers can do it. But basically, overruling, again, this is kind of yellow, orangish, because it's a little bit worse, right? We really try to avoid overruling maintainers unless something is being really kind of is really important or unreasonable. And then we can have a majority of vote of the committers can overrule a maintainer. And again, this is something we generally try to avoid. So the first thing to say is expect iteration. Even people who work super closely together and who are experts in the project, like Jan and Andy, like the chances of one of those people who sending a patch that has 0 comments on the very first trip, like basically if the patch is more than 4 lines long, it's actually pretty low, okay? So if you're coming new to the project, just expect that you're going to be sending several versions of the patch. This is kind of how it works. So timing, we have kind of a development cycle. We used to have a fixed time frame of kind of 6 months, and now that kind of adapts somewhat. But we have a development window, and during the development window, any patch that has the appropriate acts and so on can get checked in. We have the last posting date. So the idea here is this: so patches posted. So after the last posting date, after that, because we do iterations, right? Patches can get checked in after the last posting date if there are version 2 or later. As long as version 1 has been checked in, has been posted before the first posting date, then you can check it in. After the last posting date, if you post a completely new patch, then it has to wait till the next development cycle. And then we have feature freeze, where basically, things that can be checked in are primarily bug fixes, and then even near the end, we only check in really critical bug fixes. And then we have the release, and this is kind of time to avoid major holidays and so on. So how do we write a good patch? How do we write a good patch series? So first of all, there are 1,000 unwritten rules, okay, about how a patch can be done. And even if we could write them all down, it would be like a massive document like this, and it would take you 3 weeks to get through it. And like by day 2, you would give up and go away and disgust. Okay, so there's no possible way that you're going to do everything right in the first time. The only way to do it is for us to tell you. Okay, so if you send a patch and we tell you that's not how you do it, don't be embarrassed. We're not angry. Like we're just letting you know the only really way that we can how it actually works. So when you're running a patch, think about the audience. Now, there's 3 particular people that you need to think about when you're running the patch. Okay, so the first person you have to think about is the reviewer. Okay, so the reviewer needs to be able to understand the patch, decide whether it's what we want to do with Xen, and then decide whether the patch itself is correct. Then we have people looking for patches of interest. So, yes, not sure what's going on here. There we go. So basically, people scanning through a thing like this, looking for patches, either patches to cherry pick, patches to figure out maybe this is what broke my system, or so on. So, and the final thing is the archaeologist. So this is someone 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years in the future, who is looking at the code and trying to figure out why it is the way that it is. And so there's a thing that gets repeated. It's called Chesterton's fence, right? So Chesterton's fence, the principle is that if you come across a fence, you shouldn't take down the fence until you know why it was put up in the first place. Okay? If you understand why the fence was put up, then you might say, right, that fence made sense back then, but it doesn't make sense anymore. I can take it down. Or you might find out, oh, it makes sense back then, and it's still needed. I better leave the fence up. Or you could even say, you know, it didn't even make sense back then. We should just take it down, something like that, right? But in general, before you remove something and make a major change in something, you should try to understand why it was there in the first place, and that's what an archaeologist is trying to do. So coding style, we have kind of a quirky coding style. You'll just have to get used to it. So there's the major important things are in Zen coding style. Just for fun, LibXL kind of has its own coding style, so look at that. And we have recently started adding mystery rules. You don't have to, so the mystery rules is getting into the territory of, you know, there's actually like 200 total rules, right? And so far we've actually adopted almost 50 of them. So some of these you may have to kind of fault in, as it were, like, you know, maybe I have to tell you as we're going along. But if you scan through the mystery rules, you can find out the kind of things that we've committed to try to do. Try to make the patch an argument, okay? So you want to persuade the reviewer that, that the patch is necessary, that's not some other way to do it, that this patch is the right way to solve the problem, and also that this patch is correct, that there's no bugs in it. So the way that I do this, so in my head, there's kind of a template for a change log, okay? So I first just describe the current situation. I say, this is what that it's like. This is why there's a problem. And here's how the problem fixes it. And then kind of any other random, you know, things that are going on in the patch. And so then the reviewer the reviewer's job is essentially just verification, right? So if you're changing a bit of code, it's not unlikely that you actually, for that moment, know the code better than the maintainer, because if they haven't looked at it in, you know, in a month or a year or something like that. So you describe this current situation, and the maintainer can just look and say, yep, that's the way the code is. You can describe what the problem is. The maintainer can say, ah, yes, I can see where there's a problem. You say, this is how the patch fixes it, and the maintainer, you know, it makes it easy for the maintainer to walk through the thing and verify what's going on. So this is kind of an example that I have. So, you know, I've got a one-line thing there. So, you know, VF common, have IP tables, you know, wait for the lock. I describe the situations. You know, IP tables has a system-wide lock, but like if unlock contention, it just fails instead of like actually waiting. So loop over it, you know, so on. So you can see why that's a problem. I've got the error message that you would get if you run across this problem, so that it's searchable. So if someone's Googling, then they come up with this this patch. And then I describe how to fix it, and kind of other stuff going on. Now, in this case, actually, anyway, I'll get into that later. Yeah, so another thing, bisectability. It is important that every patch, as much as possible, build and not have any regressions. Okay, so you want to break down your patch trees into logical chunks, but we don't want to break any existing functionality, and we don't want to introduce a bug in one patch and then fix it in another. And you can introduce code which isn't used, but you can't introduce code which it doesn't build. And the purpose of this is that it's not often it's often the case that, you know, someone will something will be working for someone, and then at some point later they'll do a pull or a merge or something, and then something will be broken. And we want to find out where in this big, you know, range of 100 or 1,000 commits the actual functionality got broken. And bisect means you just kind of like split, and find out where it worked and where it didn't work, and find out the exact commit where it didn't work. But if individual commits and those things are broken, if I say, okay, like you know, it worked here, it doesn't work here, let's try this one. The build is broken. Okay, let's try this one. Well, the whole thing doesn't work. It doesn't boot. Okay, well, let's try this one. Okay, that worked. So that didn't work. So what about here? You know, then it just makes the whole thing a lot more complicated. So it's important to keep bisectability. So every patch needs to actually compile and have no regressions. Mechanics, so get send email. I can't go into it, but basically if you search for this online, you can. That's the easiest way to get patches onto the mailing list. There's a -- line. So this is in the anything in the commit message, anything below the -- line will be discarded when it's checked in. Okay, and furthermore, if you add CC : someone anywhere in the message, then get send email will automatically add that CC to the to the email, right? So as an easy way to make sure that you CC the maintainers every time you send the patch, you could just put CC and the name of the maintainers in your kind of commit message, and that will go out there. So for instance, in this case, you can, so under the dash line, you can put anything you want to address to the maintainers and people on the list, but not to be checked into the tree. Now, in this case, what I've done is, so first of all, I say this is version 2, and I've made it, what's the difference between version 1? I've also said another option, a way to do it would be an XYZ. Now, I think probably I would say now that should have gone on the main commit message, because the archaeologist coming back 5 years later is going to know, like, I see you did it this way, but why didn't you do it the other way? And so, and now, like, I mean, because I did this, now if someone does that, they're going to have to go back in the mailing list, if they can, and try and figure out why that decision was made. So, just a point for that. What to put in a changelog, what not to put in a changelog. So you can put a reference to already public commits. Usually what you do is you put a short hash and then the title, kind of like this. You can put references to previous discussions, and ideally kind of summaries of previous discussions, so that as much as possible, like if you have the commit log, you have everything you need, rather than having to go out to an internet somewhere. Yeah, so summarize it in the change log, and you can include other stuff like certain kinds of things below the dash line if you want. And when you're referencing manuals, so the Intel and the AMD manuals, the references themselves are stable. So if you see like volume 3, 4.4.1, then that will be the same as you're kind of going forward. Reposting, use a version number. The easiest way to do this is to add dash version 2 to send email. And list the changes that you've made so that the reviewer, they know which of the things that you've, other comments have been addressed and which have not, or whatever going on. The kind of all-purpose pass to kind of get an agile free card to allow is RFC. So basically, it means request for comments. And the idea, basically what it says is, I'm not expecting this to be checked in as it is, okay? So if there's, obvious deficiencies with it, as far as like coding style or things like that, just ignore those. What do you think about the idea as a whole? Design documents. So there's lots of things where, it takes a long time to get, it's often the case that as you're going along, you're making design decisions, and if it's a really big project that you end up actually doing a lot of work, and then when you submit the whole patch series, like, 10 or 15 patches to the list, the maintainers say, actually, we don't like you to do it this way. Why don't you do it this way? Okay. Now you're frustrated because you just spent 6 months, wasted, and you have to redo the whole thing. And and the maintainers, knowing that you've just done that, don't want to. On the one hand, they don't want to say throw all that stuff away. On the other hand, they don't like the way that you did it. They think that the other way is better. So one thing that we've done is to post design documents to the list, and to be able to check them into the tree. And I would say another thing that's often helpful for this is to come to the Xen project community call. I don't have this on here, but if you follow the list, if you look on the web page, a lot of the design things can be hashed out a bit at the community call. Dealing with maintainers, so maintainers often have a very kind of short to the point communication style. I'll just say, a lot of times we spend a whole bunch of time understanding, getting our mindset into the code that you've written, and then we're just excited to just tell you what we think about it, and we forget that there's a human on the other side of the end that you're supposed to say hello to and be polite with and this kind of stuff. So we just jump in and say what we think is wrong without just it doesn't mean we're angry or anything. Just try and read it with grace and assume positive intent unless it's obviously this otherwise. So short and direct is, ideally we would be kind of, more encouraging, but if not, that's kind of okay. What's not okay is demeaning. Okay, this is kind of one big difference between our community and some other communities. Is we don't say things like this code is garbage or something like that. No, and things that are judgment call, like being unreasonable, right? So if you basically, if you think the maintainer is being unreasonable, then the big thing is, if you have any kind of a problem where you don't understand what's going on, you don't know how to convince somebody, you don't know how to do the escalation or whatever, contact the community manager. So that's their job to help them sort things out. The other thing is to say, sometimes things fall off our list, we forget, or whatever. If it's been 2 weeks, to send a message that says ping, to say that to raise it back to the maintainer's attention to get them to review it again. Okay, and with that, I will take any questions.
Just one question. Jane touched on this yesterday, and that's for somebody new starting. What's the best place to actually start to find something to contribute to?
Yeah, so we're not very good about this. There is a wiki page that has kind of projects for it's designed to collect and hold projects for the Google Summer of Code and things like that. It's not very well maintained. So you could start there and look at that. We have GitLab tickets. And again, there are GitLab tickets. So you can go to the GitLab.com/zen-project, and you can look under there. There are issues that are tagged with. So there is a good first issue tag. So you could go look for the good first issue tag. Again, so some of those are kind of okay, but they're not always very well maintained. So some of those issues you may find have already done. Some of the issues, there may be a lot more things that could be done that haven't been done. So that's a place to start. And if you don't find anything that's kind of useful, I would say I'm kind of hoping the new community manager will be a bit more on top of this sort of thing. Because I think she did a lot of that in her previous job. But yeah, so if you don't find anything that's kind of useful, if all that seems thin and not sort of interesting, then just come to the ZenDevel IRC channel or something like that, and just say, hey, I've been looking around for good first issues. I didn't see anything. Does anyone have anything that they think they could do? Make a ticket for me. Describe what needs to be done, and then I can kind of work on it. So yeah, does that answer the question?
This is just out of personal curiosity, but how do committers actually keep track of what needs to be committed? So many of them are also maintainers, but how does that work? Do they look through the mailing list, or do the maintainers then contact the committers saying, oh, this needs to, how does that?
Yeah, so basically, most areas of the project have a committer who kind of pays attention to it. Does that make sense? And Jan is just really good. He pays attention to lots of stuff, right? He sees almost every kind of thing on the list, right? So in most cases, like basically, if there's something going on with the risk or ARM or something like that, then Stefano and Julian are aware of it. They kind of know when it's reached the point where it can be checked in, and then they check it in. Same thing with if I'm reviewing something or Jan or Andy's reviewing something, then they're kind of sort of involved in the reviewing process, or at least they're watching it being reviewed and they know when it's kind of ready to check in. Sometimes things slip through the cracks and people just aren't aware of it, and then this isn't the best thing, but then people just have to ping us on the list and say, hey, can someone check this in? And then one of the committers can pick it up and check it in.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of we're using a very, very old kind of a system, and there are things about so this is one of the things about the mailing list-based system that's not very nice. It's very easy for stuff to just kind of you send the email and then it just kind of goes in, it flows past everybody, and then it's in ancient history. No one knows about it anymore, right? Or the discussion happens and people don't see it, or discussion happens and like it's ready to be checked in, but like no one knows it's ready to be checked in, right? So that's one of the disadvantages of the mailing list. But basically what I found as far as actually discussing the patch series, we've tried doing discussions of patch series on, even for other projects, when I've done discussions or whatever on GitHub or GitLab, I haven't felt as comfortable or as expressive. I haven't felt I've been able to do as good a job commenting on the code using the GitLab interface as I have with the mailing list interface. You see what I'm saying? So we did briefly try to do a little bit of saying, well, can we do small things on GitLab and just big things on the mailing list? And it kind of didn't, like, immediately everyone noticed the things in GitLab that were less expressive than the mailing list without getting the chance to experience the positive things about using pull requests and stuff on things like GitLab. So there's a continual move to say, wouldn't it be nice if we can use some of this? There's all these features that are just automatic. You can just click and say, what are the things which are ready to be checked in, and just click check in, or whatever. And maybe we'll get there someday. But everyone does feel that like to move to GitLab, we would lose a lot of the things that we do like about the mailing list. Does that make sense? Yeah, so the question is, could you have a bot that just check for everything like that? And the answer is yes, you could write that, but it's extra work, and it's work that's already been done by GitLab. So what's that? Yeah. So for instance, there's there's something called Patchu, which looks at the mailing list and will automatically take patch trees off the mailing list, put it into a Git tree, and then basically push it onto GitLab, and then GitLab will actually do a bunch of the tests on it. So Patchu has a thing that will do GitLab tests on patches which are posted to the mailing list, and it also keeps track of like when you go look on that, it tracks. So it says, well, this says version 2. And then it'll go back and find, oh, and here's version 1, and here's version 3, or whatever. And it'll say which ones have axe, or which ones don't have axe, or where the discussion is, and things like that. So if you go to patchu.org/Xen, then you can see a lot of that stuff. So there's certainly the ability to build automation on top of Patchu, for instance, but just nobody's kind of done it yet. And people are kind of thinking like, so why should I do all the work of doing? There's a lot of complicated things to make it work reliably. You know, it's like, do we invest the time to do all the complicated work and making it work reliably just for our project, and then we have to maintain it and everything, or do we shift over to doing something like GitLab, where then GitLab have already thought about all this stuff and are maintaining it for us? So, yeah, there's always this like kind of a tension like that. Does that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah, just some stuff that vaguely crossed my brain yesterday listening to the talks, Jane's in particular, and also the discussion we had about linters and stuff. And I was wondering whether it's just maybe we need some guidance to maintainers that when they get some patches into review. Yeah, okay, you might not like the style, but put that as a secondary level of complaint. Mm-hmm. So just trying to get some hierarchy of, yeah, okay, we see where you're going. The idea is solid. We don't like the style, but start with it's going to go. It's doing stuff that we think is useful, but you're going to have to go and do some rework to get the style to match what we want it to be, or this and the. Just, I guess it's more being more inclusive. I guess, and some of the things about the short and direct, and I'm probably as short and direct as anybody in the building. But
so I have another complete talk about how to do reviews. So one of the things is to say, to make sure that you're being encouraging, right? Remind yourself, yes, I actually do want this person's patch, okay? So I think it takes, remind yourself as a reviewer. So for instance, as a reviewer, it's easy to get into the mindset of, my job is to find a problem, right? It's not your job to, your job is, if there was a problem, to find it. Right, and that's different. It's subtly different, right? So if you think my job is to find a problem, and you look at it and you don't have a problem, you feel like I failed, right? And I look at the thing, I find a problem, I'm done. No, okay. Your problem, so then you may not have found the bigger problem, and you may find a problem that's not actually there, right? So it's one of those things that's easy to get into. And the other thing is, I have in the other slide, I've got kind of like it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like you can't have this without this, you can have this without this. It's kind of an inverted pyramid, right? To say that first thing, look to see if this is the right patch. Like, do you need the patch? Like, is it and then look at the architecture. There's no point in reviewing the architecture of the patch if the whole patch isn't even needed, right? There's no point in getting into the details of making it efficient if the architecture is wrong, and there's no point in talking about the all the little coding style nits and stuff like that if they're going to have to rewrite it anyway because the code is the algorithm is so efficient, right? So it's focus on the big things first and then focus in on the small things and make it clear. So we often say, make it clear when the thing you think is really small. Just say nit. It's like nit, whatever. And saying, I realize this is a tiny thing. I'm not angry at you. I don't think you're dumb. I just but this needs to change for whatever reason. So change it, right? Yeah, and I have another. If you want to hear about that, if you go to the Zen Project YouTube channel, then I have the title of the talk is Reviewing for Non-Maintainers. So if you search for that, on YouTube, then that should come up, and it has a lot of this same kind of information. So, and basically, kind of like I often kind of switch back and forth between this talk and the reviewing talk, as it were. So like next Zen Summit, there's a pretty good chance I'll give the talk on reviewing again. So thanks for that. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Great. Thanks.